this guy's so comfortable in who he is that he can kind of pull that off. And he's not threatened in his masculinity by things that he just genuinely likes.
From the women's section, I'm quite happy with them, and annoyingly, they get more compliments than some of my really expensive stuff sometimes.
I'm attracted to a more classical ideal. It doesn't mean there aren't elements of a more modern type of masculinity. It changes and it evolves, but the overall frame, for want of a better word, of this era of masculinity is something that I still like and I think is a good path for most men.
Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. Today we're in London.
At the Brasserie Zedel, the Bar Americain.
And we have a guest, James. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Raphael. Thank you.
And we'll talk about what it means to be a classic gentleman or classically masculine in the modern day. I think Karl Lagerfeld once said, you've lost control of your life and you just went and bought a pair of sweatpants. Now, looking around us today, sweatpants are all over the place. How do you think that quote fits into our modern times, James?
I think it's more relevant than ever now that sweatpants are so popular. We just went on a long haul flight to get here. Most people on the plane are wearing sweatpants, if not pajamas. I think to wear proper clothes in a situation where most people aren't, it says that I'm still going to be in control of myself. I'm still going to conduct myself in an adult way, rather than give in to this very childish temptation of I just need to be the most comfortable. I just need everything to be soft. So I think it's actually quite a masculine concept to dress well and to take pride in yourself rather than just giving in to the easy way all the time.
Well, I think a well-cut pair of pants, especially I noticed that I like high-waisted trousers when I travel. They stay up and they're still comfortable, especially if they're cut wider. So I'm not feeling like I'm missing out. So, Jack, what do you think are the key elements of masculinity today?
That's a very good question. The key elements of masculinity today, from my point of view, would be in the fundamentals of how one is, in terms of respect. And I kind of feel like that's probably the starting point for a lot of people, should be that element of respect for yourself, respect for others. And from there, I think it grows. I mean, James, you've recently released a video all about gaining respect.
Exactly.
Are you of the opinion that it's given first before it's received?
Not necessarily so. I think the most important thing when it comes to respect is self-respect. And everything that we do is an indication of our levels of self-respect. The dressing is a great example. Even the way we eat, the way we work, that tells people the levels of self-respect that we have. And you can't expect anybody to respect you more than you respect yourself. So although I think the clothing, the body language, the way we speak, it can command respect, if you don't actually respect yourself deep down, it's smoke and mirrors.
Interesting. So yeah, I would say that that element and concept of respect is a big element of how masculinity is in the 21st century, when we don't have to wear the classic style clothes that we all want to wear and we choose to wear. That's the driving force that I think is very key for me, at least.
Mm-hmm. I also think the respect or masculinity is broadly defined by culture. Right? If you look in the US, if you live in a rural area of the US, chances are a truck is closely tied to masculinity, right? Maybe having a beard is masculine, having a pair of jeans and a pair of boots, versus maybe wearing a pink seersucker jacket would be considered to be maybe very unmanly, versus if you go to, Nantucket and you wear a pink pair of pants, right? This is widely accepted and super popular. So I think where we are hugely informs us how at least the majority receives that kind of masculinity level.
I agree. And I don't like to be too prescriptive about what I think is the correct way to dress. I think it's more important that you actually put thought into it and you have intention about it. I don't wear Western wear because I think that would be incongruent with my personality, my background. But I think if a man wears a pair of well-made cowboy boots, jeans, he tucks his shirt in, he has his belt buckle, he's well-groomed, to me, he's just as well-dressed as you and I. What I don't like is when people don't care in any regard.
And I mean, I think it can go back to self-respect, right? I think the aspect is their confidence. If you wear things confidently, it doesn't matter if it's maybe something that would be perceived as feminine in one part of the world or masculine in another, but it's how you wear it and how you go about it. For example, Jack, the other day, you were wearing a pair of espadrilles, and you were like, I bought these from the women's department. And I thought it was quite remarkable because, you need a very good level of self-confidence that you go to the women's department and buy the shoes, but then also share with others that you did so.
For sure. I mean, that all comes back to the fact that my partner and we share a shoe size for one or two specific styles, so a slip-on like a loafer or a pair of well-made slippers or indeed espadrilles.
I was going to say this doesn't work if you're size 11. But
No, I have relatively small feet for what would be considered masculine, and I think that's another element. For instance, my pinky ring wouldn't fit your hand because it would be considered a feminine size. However, for me, it fits perfectly. And back to the espadrilles, it's the element of my partner was wearing a pair, they just look like a standard pair of espadrilles because they are.
It's a unisex design.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Historically, they're a unisex design. They look good on her. She took them off and left them on the floor. I said, I wonder what they look like on me. Tried them on. Next day, we went and bought more pairs for me. And I am proud of that because it's a fun story, first and foremost, but also I don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on really expensive designer espadrilles. I mean, I'm sure, James, you've seen some of the designer espadrilles in the States are so expensive.
Yeah.
£7 from Primark. They're from the women's section. I'm quite happy with them, and annoyingly, they get more compliments than some of my really expensive stuff sometimes.
That's funny. You also mentioned a really good aspect, that of built. So once you understand who you are and what works for you, that can be really great. Because I talk to many men of modest height, and they oftentimes they complain. They say, the watches are too big for my wrist. It just looks wrong. So oftentimes they resort to kind of more traditional women's size watches or vintage watches to get that smaller form factor.
Yep, same here. Exactly. I prefer a smaller watch. I'm quite happy to look at women's watches when shopping vintage. Granted, some of them can be a bit feminine in design, but a timeless piece like a tank style watch, I think, that can be worn by anyone. Again, I kind of like the ability to share a few elements of wardrobe.
I see it.
I didn't get it.
I've got a question for you two. Again, all slightly different ages here. I think for my generation in particular, physicality in terms of working out, being physically capable has become quite an important part of what it means to be a man today. And I know that even though I have dressed this way for a long time, I think it didn't start looking good on me until I started taking care of my body in a better way. So what's your guys' opinion on that?
I think, in the US, typically and also historically, working out in a gym has been much more prevalent than, let's say, in Europe.
Yes.
And it has been much more part of the culture of masculinity. Now, I think it is really good to take care of your body, right? Because at the end of the day, you have one. And we all know, studies show physical exercise, all these things help to stay healthy and feel better. So I think that's a good thing. Now, if there's just one way of masculinity where it's like you need to have the six-pack and you need to have, look good in a muscle shirt, then I think that becomes, in a way, not quite fair, because maybe not everyone wants that. And I think, Winston Churchill was famously against sports. he was no sports for me, right? He drank, he ate, yet people would not think of Winston Churchill as a sissy or a female character at all, right?
Yeah.
So I think it has its place, but I personally don't think it's good to say, if you want to be a man, you have to work out 5 times a week in the gym.
I think for me, I've historically been very uncomfortable in sporting environments. The gym is not a happy place for me. I've never liked it. I've got more creative bones in my body than I have physical bones in my body, if that makes sense. And ultimately, I think, yes, I have been blessed with a relatively fast metabolism, but I also believe in a lot of moderation. Mm-hmm. I don't drink to excess. I don't eat to excess. Again, I think it actually goes back to respect. You know what your boundaries are, you know what your limits are. And I think we did a video a while back about how to drink like a gentleman. And it's the ability to say, I'm good, and know when your boundary is. So although as I age, I am starting to appreciate that my clothes from 5 years ago aren't as slim anymore on me, or rather the other side, they're too slim on me now. But I think physical care can be more than just going to the gym.
And I think the aspect of care, right, is a big one. I think when you like Karl Lagerfeld said, you've given up when you wear sweatpants. You could argue the same way. It's like if you let your body go, right? If you don't get your hair cut, if you don't shave, and you can have a perfectly groomed beard. So I'm not saying you're only taken care of when you shave, not at all. It's like when you groom yourself, when you look after yourself, when you look after your mental health. All these things are signs of care. And I think I once heard someone say, I don't care that you are a larger man, but when you let yourself go and don't care, that becomes very unattractive. Mm-hmm. So I think, and care can look different to different people, right? For some people, that means I never eat any fat. I only eat chicken breasts, and I call ahead at a restaurant and tell them not to use oil when I come in. Versus for others, that may mean, they'll go for long walks. But ultimately, if you benchmark yourself against others in society, whether it's their truck or their six-pack or whatever it is, I think it's a good path to unhappiness, versus if you just look introspectively and say, who am I today? And benchmark yourself to that and just get better every day by a little bit, I think you'll be more fulfilled.
I agree. But I do think that we need role models. Yes. And, health is very important to me, but one of the reasons that I use Sean Connery as an example, or like a leading light of this classically masculine idea, is his physical presentation, his body, for example, it's not wildly unachievable. It's not the six-pack that we see today. So I think for the average guy, especially a young guy, I see all these wild body transformations online that are completely unrealistic, that are steroid users. Whereas what he has is, you think, okay, you work out 3-4 times a week, you eat relatively healthily, and you can look like that. So I think I do think it's important for the younger generation to have some kind of role model, something to aspire to, because we're also consuming images constantly. People are on their phones so much that that's their environment. Their environment isn't the world out here. So they're going to see something. They're going to have some kind of role model. And to discover role models that I think would be healthy ideals to aspire to, I think that's useful.
No, it can certainly help. I think when you're, like Jack, for example, like your genetics have an impact too. I remember when I was working out, in college with friends, and we do the exact same exercise. We'd work out at the same time, and I would show more progress and also look different. Someone else showed even more progress, and the other guy, he was just more stringy and it didn't show up at all. Yeah. That also means, okay, you have to accept your body. Maybe then, look for a role model that is more like you or that you identify with.
There are so many to choose from as well.
And I think that comparison against others is something, potentially one of the biggest lessons that I'm probably still learning, if I'm being honest, about what masculinity is we're all comparing ourselves to each other's. I think it goes way back to when we were cavemen, and it's all about risk, and we want to know that the rest of the pack is doing the same as us so that we feel validated and we're not scared. But in that, you can kind of lose yourself because you're trying to keep up with you or someone else. So I think with masculinity, there's that element of being comfortable in your own self more often than not.
Absolutely. And that's the attractive part, right? If you're confident and comfortable and can do that. I have a friend who's like, like driving a minivan is more masculine than a truck. Okay. Now, at first, that sounds really odd, right? But you're like, okay, if you can, take this, if you can say, hey, what does my family need? What makes more sense? And I'm so confident in myself that I don't doubt my masculinity when I wear a minivan. Yeah. Or, when you think of, the classic gentlemanly drink, right? It's whiskey, yeah. Right? So cheers, everyone. And you can take a sip. But that's the picture that has been portrayed as what it means to be masculine.
Yeah. I'll be completely honest, though. When I'm at a bar with a man and he orders a girly drink, yeah. I do think it's a little bit embarrassing.
What would you consider?
Like a porn star martini or like some kind of very fruity cocktail. I think, really? Come on, have an old-fashioned, have a whiskey.
What is it about those drinks that make them masculine for you?
It is just a stereotype. It is a tradition, for sure. But, I don't take it too seriously. But I'll be honest with you, I do judge people a little bit based on what they drink.
Yeah. See, I was quite... my wife had an uncle, and he lives in rural America, and he is, a man's man. He probably has, 38 combustion engines. He's a carpenter, he works in construction, and everything around him says manly. Yeah. But when he got a drink, he would get a pina colada, and which is probably one of those girly drinks you mentioned, right? Yeah. And I thought of that as being actually very cool, right? I thought, like, this guy's so comfortable in who he is that he can kind of pull that off. And he's not threatened in his masculinity by things that he just genuinely likes. And I think that's that when you genuinely like it and you own it, yeah. That's one thing, right? When you are kind of insecure and you're drinking the whiskey that you really don't like, yeah. And you can see it, well, that's weird too. And at the end of the day, we're so different. Some people like something sweet, you like something more tart, you like something bitter. Why would we judge the masculinity on that? I mean, of course, it's history, it's culture, but...
I say this I'm wearing a pink jacket right now, so obviously I don't feel like I have to fit in with everything. But I think it's interesting what you say. When somebody is so hyper masculine, or if a woman was hyper feminine, but then they do one little thing that kind of flips that expectation, it is kind of cool. It is kind of funny, but yeah, sometimes you have to be at a certain level to pull that off and make it kind of funny and part of your identity rather than just another thing of you like, oh, and he orders a pina colada as well.
Yeah. And you made a good point of judgment, right? I think as human beings, we all judge. Yeah. We judge all the time because it's something that we learn, right? There's an experience, and in order to protect ourselves, in order to get ahead, we make these judgment calls. And it's only upon reflection that you're then like, oh, yes, maybe that's unfair. Like, if you could walk us through a bit of your style journeys. Why don't you start, Jack? In the beginning, when you got into clothing and how you felt and how things changed over time.
For me, I think I've always been exposed to quite eccentric styles. A big part of my appreciation of style has come from comic books, old movies like the Bond series, for instance. And yeah, because a lot of these comic book characters were created in the late 30s, early 40s, therefore a suit was very much the everyday, which is why the Joker wears a purple suit for sure, but it's still a suit. So that's always been there in my subconscious. But as I grew up, I think I definitely experimented with those really zany out there styles first. And I realized that I was perhaps taking too much from what I liked in those role models, and there wasn't enough of me in that. So as I've grown, I've definitely done less character and more character, if that makes sense. I've learned more about myself, the things that I like, the things that I don't like. And I would describe my style at the moment as being flexible. I enjoy the ability to put a pair of jeans and a nice Shetland sweater on for the weekend. If I'm with either of my two nieces, they're young, things get messy. I don't want to turn up in a bespoke suit and expect that it's going to be pristine at the end of the day. So you make adjustments for that. Style should be comfortable, in my opinion. You shouldn't be shoehorning your style into every aspect of your life in a really artificial way.
Yeah. If you go through your style journey and you reflect, like how has judgment maybe evolved and changed over time?
Well, I've always been into very extreme forms of physical presentation. I've always liked eccentric people like you. I mean, like you did as well, not like you're an eccentric. You are a little bit, but we all are.
I'll take what I can get.
We all are. So when I was younger, I was pretty gothic in my style of dark clothing, makeup even, big boots all the time. I just enjoyed creating a look. As my tastes changed, obviously I went away from that. My style journey more into this happened. I always enjoyed wearing blazers. I just like the feeling of that. I enjoyed the kind of put together and confidence that I got from wearing these kind of clothes. It's the antithesis of the sweatpants. When I do wear sweatpants, I do feel weak. I do feel like I've lost control of myself. I feel weak in sneakers. Sweaters, I don't like it. I just don't feel good in it. So
it's almost like putting on a white suit or something, right? Sometimes it changes the way you think of yourself.
Yeah.
And then it also changes the way you stand.
Yeah.
The way maybe you walk and
Yes.
talk. And it just impacts it all.
Yeah. But I do think it's very important to wear clothes that you're still very comfortable in. And this is one thing that I noticed with a man who is well-dressed or not, is the guys that wear these kind of clothes all the time, like me and you, we sit very comfortably. I will go and move chairs or do anything that I need to do wearing these kind of clothes. Whereas the guy who wears a suit once a year, he's kind of sat like this in his suit. Like he doesn't feel natural in it. He doesn't feel like he can move around freely. Yeah. So that's something that I notice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it was in the beginning, right? You maybe dive into classic style and you read, Bernhard Rötzel's Gentleman, Alan Flusser, Dressing the Man, Styling the Man, and so forth, Closing the Man. And you maybe watch videos, of Gen Z, of Antonio, Real Men, Real Style, or whatever it is, and you learn, right? And you're like, ooh, that's interesting. There's history, there are rules. You learn all that stuff, and then you sometimes become, judgy. I certainly remember from me, right? You all of a sudden starting like, ooh, this is wrong, or this is incorrect. Oh, you're wearing turnips? Cuffs with this, that's not right. You're wearing a pair of espadrilles with a double-breasted jacket.
Yeah,
wrong.
Button-down collar with a tie.
Exactly.
I get so many comments about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you develop this, and then if you realistically take a step back, you're like, oh wow, I'm in judgment here, and why is that? I think deep down there's maybe an insecurity, and you like to have the rules to guide you and define everything for you, whereas I think true style in my mind is more of someone who understands all the rules and understands why they're there and has the history, but then just starts creating things and breaking them in ways that works with their personality.
Would you be, or rather would I be accurate in saying that as I've seen your style evolve, you've relaxed a little more, you enjoy softer construction, softer cloths and fabrics?
Yes, I think, style evolution is always manifold. For example, in my case, over the years, I've certainly gained weight. So some of the things I had in the beginning, they no longer fit. And I would say, ironically, I probably eat less now and I work out more often than I did in the past. But it's because your metabolism changes. And so you're like, okay, I need to do things, I need to stay in shape because I want to have certain items. But then, yes, there's things on a color level. I remember, when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I would sometimes have these outfit challenges just for myself. Where I'm like, can I combine 5 patterns in this outfit and make it look good, right? And then I also bought items maybe more on eBay because I couldn't afford any other items. And typically these are items that are bolder and more eccentric because these are the items people don't wear as often, they don't know how to combine. So then you end up with all of these, right? And you still try to make it work. Yeah. But yes, I think my style probably has gotten more casual too in terms of I like a soft jacket, right? Ideally, if I had a jacket that feels like a sweater, but looks the part, where I'm like, I like this look, I like how it feels, that would be my ideal.
Yeah. I got a question for you. When the Gentleman's Gazette became more successful, did that change your personal style? Because for me, since doing Gent Z full time, I feel a little bit more validated in dressing up all the time because I feel like it suits my purpose, it suits my mission in life. And if anybody were to ask me, why are you so dressed up? Not that it's any of their business, but I feel like there's a genuine reason. I'm representing myself and what I do here. So did the same thing happen to you?
For me, it was the other way around because I only started it because it was a hobby. So I always liked to dress up. And I was already kind of, someone who maybe put more thought into their outfits than other people did. There's certainly an element of, when you're more well-known, right, people will recognize you. And so you ask yourself, well, maybe how do I want to be perceived? And I just said, I am who I am, and I'm a family father, and I, look a bit dorky sometimes on my, cargo bike with my orange helmet, and my seersucker shorts, my polo shirt, and my boat shoes with my 7-year-old daughter in the back. But I'm like, I'm okay with that, and I found that people run into you and recognize you at a Chinese takeout, at the UPS store, in places where you may not expect it. And so I think that part didn't change it so much. But of course, I like buying clothes and having it part of the business and the business expense. And I like to dress up and do fun things.
So when we consider the term classic masculinity, I'm of the impression that sometimes that term classic can be attached to a certain period in time, a certain age bracket, of sort of the 30s to perhaps the 60s maybe. What elements do you think are worth keeping from those eras, and what elements do you think is actually good that we've gotten rid of in the 21st century?
To a start, James?
I do think that it's definitely attributed to a particular era. And I think it's attributed to that era because, coming up to the late 60s, early 70s, that's when the consensus of what a man is ended. And we open up these many different interpretations of what masculinity is. I don't think people were debating it so much in the 1940s of what is a man, because it was quite obvious.
That's true. Today
everyone was doing it.
And today it's very different, right? You have transgender, you have fluid things, you have, different pronouns. So it definitely has changed.
Yeah. I think the things that are good that we should keep would be the self-respect that comes through in the way you dress, the way you hold yourself, the lifestyle that you lead. Some of the bad things would be smoking 2 packets of unfiltered cigarettes a day. I've very deliberately avoided smoking content on my channel because I don't want to encourage that in young guys. Definitely people's attitudes about women and other topics were probably quite what we would consider to be outdated now. I think that people have the opportunity to imbibe many different cultures, more information, and be their own version of a man. I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. Although I'm attracted to a more classical ideal, it doesn't mean there aren't elements of a more modern type of masculinity. I love skincare products. I talk about skincare products. I do skincare every day. In the 50s, men were still washing their face with a bar of soap, which I think we all know is not the right thing to do these days. So it changes and it evolves, but the overall frame, for want of a better word, of this era of masculinity is something that I still like and I think is a good path for most men, actually.
Yeah, that was well said. I think, sometimes one of the comments I think that we see a lot is people hating on white sneakers. Now, if you go back historically, white sneakers have been around since the 30s. And if you just went about time, you'd consider it to be a classic. Mm-hmm. Yet a lot of people who would, prescribe to the classic style are sometimes, upset. I think it's because they're really upset about the sneaker and how it basically was a start of the casualization of everything else, right? Sneaker with a suit, sneaker with everything. So they hate on that, even though it's a classic item. You mentioned, how people or how men view women. I also think it's how you treat women and how you think of them in society, right? I've talked to people that are like, oh, I don't think my daughter should be a doctor or a lawyer, right? And I think that mindset of really, it doesn't matter if you have genitals or whatever it doesn't matter if you have a penis or not, right? You can achieve whatever it is that you want, and that shouldn't limit you. And I like that, people are, they say, hey, I identify as a man, and I love classic style, and that's how I dress that way, and that's accepted today. I think that is really, really good, and I think great things will come from that, because looking back historically, if you were gay or lesbian, you always had to hide it and suppress it, but that is not something that will lead to a better society in my mind.
Because you could consider that people who enjoy and indulge in potentially more formal classic style are becoming a minority group. It's one of those things that...
Absolutely.
Yeah, and from that point of view, for me, I'm less interested in the details, ironically, of a person's physical bits and pieces. I'm more interested in who they are internally and their values. Let's have a conversation.
At the same time, I think, there was an old quote, like if John Bull turns around and looks at you in the street, you're not well dressed. And today it's the opposite, right? If I just fit in and I wear the same Crocs and sweatpants that everyone else wears, then no one turns around. Versus if we dress this way, we get a lot more attention. Yeah. But I'm like, yes, we're just a minority of enthusiasts who decide to wear that. And can you be classically masculine without this type of dress? Absolutely. But oftentimes there's still this old connotation that, ooh, he dresses in a three-piece suit, he is a gentleman. Al Capone dressed in a three-piece suit. Didn't make him a gentleman,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, do you consider that there are any negative connotations of being classically masculine?
It depends if you view them as negative. Definitely in the US, the way that I present myself, the way that my viewers present themselves, we are interpreted as more conservative. If you're conservative, that's not a negative. If you aren't, then you might not like that. You might wish to dispel that. But I think that's just an obvious judgment call that you would make if you see somebody with pink hair. You probably think they're a bit more liberal or a bit more left-wing. Yeah. Not necessarily true. So I don't honestly find that there are many downsides, except that my dry cleaning costs me more than it probably would be if I wore athleisure all the time.
It's a good point about that, that connotation between, oh, you're wearing a jacket, you must be conservative, right? I think I talked to Bernhard Rötzl once, and he was like, I love living today. This is a much better time politically, in any respect, but I'm sometimes invited by these, more right-wing groups who think I'm more politically in that mindset because I dress this way. But I think it's completely detached these days.
Is that the same in the UK? Because conservative in the UK is such a different ideal as
It
well.
is.
Yeah.
I think there is a stigma sometimes in the UK that if you wear a suit and tie in a very particular way, then you're a boring politician. Perhaps you support.
In what way?
In what way? Wearing the suit?
Yeah.
I would consider it's kind of almost with a sense of have to. Obligation rather than want to, because it's like again, it's about that shoehorning the style into every aspect of your life. It's like, well, this is what a man wears, therefore I will wear it, without any real appreciation for the clothing. And I think that's the difference between people like ourselves who enjoy things sartorially, from the point of view of it's the detail, the craft, the enjoyment of wearing something that we feel good in, not the clothes wearing us.
Yeah, it's like uniform versus playfulness, right? I mean, where are you at with that?
Well, I think the uniform of today, go outside any pub after 5 o'clock in London, you just see a swarm of blue dress shirts with chinos, black dress shoes, and a backpack. To me, that's not even in the same conversation of style that we're having. So I do associate that more with just I'm dressing this way because I have to, not because I love it. And that's such a uniform of just corporate life that I don't place any kind of judgment. I don't look at a man like that and think about what his life would be like, what he believes in, except that he, works 9 to 5 and drinks at All Bar One afterwards. But yeah, it's a very interesting difference in the way that clothing and a more classical idea of masculinity is perceived. I also think a lot of our reference points when it comes to movies, singers, pop culture of the things that we like are quite American. And people in the US are much more in touch with that. I mean, an average woman my age in the UK does not know who Cary Grant is. But in the US, everybody does.
That's true. And, Cary Grant, and he had it's easier to have a style that is more, uniformed in the sense, if you always wear a gray suit, right, and you always wear a white or an off-white shirt, and you just change the color of your socks, your pocket square, and your ties, you've made things a lot easier for yourself. And sometimes the driving force behind that, is manifold. Like Obama said once, I don't want to think about what I wear. I don't want to waste any mental energy. So I always wear the same things that make me look presentable, good, right? Then you can be on the opposite spectrum where you're like, I look at clothing as being a form of self-expression, and I want to do different things, and I want to try stuff. Or maybe you just don't want to make mistakes and fit in and get the promotion. Whatever it is, I think if you're fear-driven and dress that way, there's a very different outcome than if you are passion-driven. And when you're passion-driven, not every one of your outfits will be a home run. Sometimes you look back and you're like, ooh.
Especially when you film everything that you do.
Exactly. It's almost like a great diary, though, right?
Yeah.
Because you can look back and intentionally in Gentleman's Gazette, we've not deleted old videos. I know lots of other channels who did that. And yesterday we had an event together, and I talked to Mustafa. Mustafa was like, during the pandemic, I subscribed to YouTube Premium, and I downloaded all your videos, and I watched all of them in the car. For some reason, it was a car and had time, and went through that. And I was like, yes, it is great, because you will also see the progression that I made, that every one of our hosts made. And I think that's also something I want to portray. When we do things, it's not always going to be perfect. And as a gentleman or a classic masculine man, I think it's important to say, I take a risk, I will make mistakes, but I will learn from those mistakes, and I will not let the mistakes define me.
Yes, I think that is one of the biggest things that I've learned working with you, is that element of don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And it's about doing rather than about planning sometimes. Like if you're always planning for one thing, you might never actually realize it, because there's always something that you could do on top of that. Oh, I could tweak this, I could tweak that. You're a very sort of let's do it sort of person.
And planning is great, right? We plan this entire trip intricately, makes us efficient, and it's all good. But sometimes I think planning can also be, just if you want to control everything in your life, that says, I'm not confident that I can handle a situation that's thrown at me, that I can handle that. Versus, someone who maybe is always spontaneous, that's a problem too. I mean, how do you operate, James?
Very spontaneously. And I'm glad that you mentioned this topic because I have never really, especially in the early days, been that happy with the videos that I've made. But I know that if I keep trying to make the perfect video, I never would have started the channel. And I put a demand on myself of making at least 3 videos a week. And if my hair happens to look bad in the videos or I'm just not on top form, then I would still make the video. And some of those videos that my ego would have wanted to not upload became the biggest videos that took my channel to where it is today. But it's an incredible diary. When I look back, it's not even been a year. I look different. I'm 40 pounds lighter. Been through about 3 different hairstyles. I speak differently. I've got better at communicating to the camera.
You quit your job.
I quit my job. Everything about me is different in 1 year. And I don't think it would have happened quite so quickly if it weren't for this form of accountability, this video diary that you're making of yourself. It's like an extreme journaling, I would say.
And I think it's also like, being masculine, especially as a young man, means to be open and be curious. I think, you started as a goth. Now you are into classic man style. I've seen many men who are really into classic man style, hardcore early on. Yeah. And I think it's born of the insecurity. They're very rule driven, very judgy. But then maybe later on, maybe they become a father and things change, or they are in a completely different field and they leave. And that's okay. Give yourself permission to experiment, try, make mistakes, and see what feels right.
I know that I'm going to look back at the videos that I'm filming now in a couple of years and probably cringe. But good, because if I don't cringe at who I used to be, then I haven't evolved.
You haven't made any progress, right? It's that idea of I'm getting a little better every day, and my benchmark is myself.
Yeah.
And I think if men or humans follow that, we will have a better world, probably.
For sure.
We talked about that self-respect, and you mentioned respect for others. Tell us a little bit more about your views about that.
I'm very much of the opinion, and I think it's definitely to do with my upbringing as well. I'm very much of the opinion that you pay respect first, and it's returned in kind. If it's not, that's not your fault. That's the other person. That's on them. But for me, I would always, and actually, it goes back to, I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's about treating the doorman the same as you would treat the president of the company.
Yes.
That I've always really enjoyed that idea.
Like that humanism behind it.
Exactly. I mean, we've been filming all over London. We've had to take many Ubers. We've met many great people in doing just that in itself. And just because they're fulfilling a service and driving the car for us, it doesn't mean that we can't respect that. We can't respect them. And it's made the journey go quicker. We've had a more enjoyable time.
And we learned something about it.
Exactly.
Right? I asked people questions, where they're from, what they like. And, I remember one guy saying, "Oh, you uplifted me." I was like, I'll leave you a tip in the app. And he was like, "No need, man. You uplifted me." I was like, that's cool, right? We can make an impact, even if it doesn't seem like that.
Yeah, and it feels better to be that way anyway. It's the same as, I don't know if you've ever worked in a bar or a restaurant, a service kind of job. I found it's much more enjoyable to be really nice to people. It would make the job go quicker and more pleasant to do that. And it's the same in everyday life.
I think almost everyone should, spend some time in the service industry. Yeah. So you just understand what it's like to be on the other end.
Or just work in a shop or something. Yeah.
That's actually where I started. I started in retail, department store, selling toys actually. That was, it was great fun. But we always used to say amongst ourselves in the staff room that good customer service starts with those 2 words, good customer. And it's something that I've followed through into my life on the other side of the cashier point. If I'm a good customer, I'm going to get good customer service.
And I think respect is also, on the one hand, you have the respect that needs to be earned, right? It's you don't look up to me as a boss if I treat you poorly, right? It's like you see over time, okay, he follows through on what he says, we agree on something and it's done. And then after a while, you're like, okay, I respect what they do. I know where it's going. And there's you've never met this person. You're just getting into the Uber and you just, respect their car, their possessions. You think about what may be in their interest and you go about that way. I think that's also a very masculine thing to do. What are your thoughts, James?
Yeah. I think there is a difference between surface level respect that you should pay everyone and a higher level of respect, which I think men should be intentional and deliberate about being worthy of earning. A lot of people are quite obsessed with being respected, right? People think, you should respect me. And you think, well, why actually? Sure, we should be pleasant and civil to each other, but if you want to be respected as a father, as a boss, as an employee, that's something that you have to earn with your action. And it's a good frame to think about. Why would somebody respect me? How can I do this job or play this role in my life to earn that respect?
Or maybe ask yourself, why is it so important that others respect you, right? Is it because maybe you don't have that respect internally and you try to fill that void by having others give you that confirmation? Yeah. Maybe you just have to reframe where you're at.
I think ultimately there is an element of balance within that, because I think it can go too far the other way, and it kind of draws on other parts of the conversation that we've had today around being confident and comfortable in yourself. That can go too far the other way, like we were talking about with letting yourself go. You could be too okay with yourself in the element of, I'm just whatever. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Well, that's the original blue pill versus red pill argument. The blue pill is, you're just fine as you are. You don't need to change anything. But yeah, there's always things that everybody can change, but it doesn't mean we should necessarily kill ourselves over it or criticize others for not doing that.
And vice versa, just shouldn't give up either and be like, I'm never going to reach that level of perfection, so what's the point in trying? Yeah. I think,
And sometimes also reframing. I read a study where they said, couples who are in a committed, happy relationship are much more likely to both gain weight over time than others who are not. But you could reframe it and say, hey, we're in a loving, committed relationship. How about we, both at the same time commit to working out together regularly and try to counteract the trend?
It's also a sign of respect for your partner. I want to be a good husband or boyfriend for you.
Yeah. And sometimes people are like, well, rather than wearing a suit, just hit the gym and work out hard. And I'm always like, well, yes, if you, all of a sudden change your lifestyle and you work out really hard and you have this like really Michelangelo-like body, you look better than if you weigh 300 pounds. But clothing helps to improve the person who you are today. And even if you are Michelangelo or James Bond, wearing that suit gets you a step up from where you were before, probably, right? And so it's like, don't try to change the world or change yourself from like 0 to 100. Take little steps.
And I think that people right now don't seem to understand that you can do many things at once. And I do think this is a bit of an issue in the manosphere that I see of you need to focus. I heard this last night. I'm just focusing on making money right now. I'm just focusing on myself. You can focus on many different elements of your life. You can go to the gym and shop for new clothes at the same time. You can focus on your career and try and find a partner at the same time. You have many hours in the day. As long as you use them constructively and you have this higher ideal of your life that you're reaching for, I don't think you have to be so compartmentalized.
I actually think it's bad for you, right? I remember like when I was in law school, I thought like, I had to sit and study all day for the bar exam until I realized, if I actually take time for myself, I go outside for a run, right? I have a nice meal with friends and that recharges me. I actually study better and get more done than if I just sit there dreadfully over my desk all day.
Yeah. And as a content creator, if my entire life was just filming and writing videos in my apartment, sure, I might get more work done, but the person behind the camera would be slowly crumbling, and I wouldn't be able to talk about life with any validity because I wouldn't have one anymore. Yeah. One thing that I noticed with the more I got to know you, the more I got to know Antonio, even Alpha M, they'd all been with the same woman since, before they were started, even in, not your case, but, bankruptcy, literally, same woman. So that did kind of change my perspective on the whole dating and marriage thing of, okay, you don't need to have it all figured out before you meet that person. You can go on that journey together.
Exactly, and it, makes you stronger too.
Yeah.
And I think, if we think about classic masculine style and James Bond, one of the challenges young men have today is social media and comparison, right? If you're, on Instagram, if you're on Tinder, you constantly compare yourself, and you're also confronted with, a life that looks glamorous and great. And it's very easy to think, oh, what am I doing wrong that I'm not there, right? It's very easy to put yourself down. So I found for myself, I actually live a happier life if I actively disengage and just use social media in a very intentional way when I want to do research on, some shoes or clothes or reach out to specific people. So I think shifting time spent from screens to real life interactions makes you a much better masculine gentleman.
I agree. Get off the internet now.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for that discussion.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And I look forward to doing more videos with all of you again.
Excellent.
Likewise.
Thank you.